His age is an issue, and people have every right to consider it.
Presidents do fall. They do. They trip and fall. President Obama did a few times. But no president has ever been 81 years old and run for re-election while they did so. His age is an issue here.
In a lot of countries, people who've been in office a longer period of time are praised for their wisdom. And I think that Joe Biden rightly says that he has grown very wise in his many decades in public office.
Do you think he has the stamina to finish a second term if he were?
Yes, I do. And please don't bother me with such frivolity, okay?
I love Nancy Pelosi. Gosh, I wish we had so many Nancy Pelosi's on our side, but it's not about Nancy Pelosi. It's about Joe Mumbles. Joining me now, my buddy Josh Hammer of the Great Josh Hammer Show. Okay, Josh, you and I know that Joe Biden is clearly not well. He's not, whatever it is, Alzheimer's, dementia, senile, old. No one knows. You're never going to get a straight answer, but he's not well. He's not okay. Certainly can't run the country. But do the voters know? And more importantly, do the voters actually care?
So the polling, Jesse, shows that the voters do care. I mean, 70+% of Democrats, of registered Democrats, tell pollsters that they would prefer Joe Biden not be the nominee. That number is even higher for independents. Here's the problem. The problem is that the Democratic National Committee, the DNC, operates as most party systems do in a fairly straightforward, hierarchical, top-down fashion. And if the incumbent president of the United States, who has the power of the bully pulpit, it's not a particularly powerful bully pulpit, given that this man is senile and is mumbling his words, but it's still a bully pulpit, given that he has that, given that he has the fundraising apparatuses in place. It by definition is very hard to take on an incumbent president in a situation like that. So Biden would have to just read the tea leaves. I mean, assuming that he hasn't already worked out a sweetheart deal when it comes to the Hunter Biden stuff, because I saw that you kind of put out there on Twitter, and I'm inclined to think that it actually is plausible. But he would have to kind of come to his consensus, because the primary is not going to work. But again, Democrats tell pollsters they don't want Biden. So it just remains to be seen whether Biden is listening to Democrats' own voters.
In case you're wondering about the theory Josh is referring to, it's one I've expressed on this show before, but anyway, this is me from a while ago. I think the powers that be are tired of Joe Biden, frustrated with him, and I think this entire thing is a coordinated effort to get Joe Biden to resign. Josh, if he does resign, and if that theory does hold water, it's going to be Gavin Newsom, right?
So yes and no. I mean, I agree with you that from our perspective, kind of you and I are on Twitter all day long. I mean, we follow this closely. I mean, Gavin Newsom is very clearly running a shadow campaign for president. I mean, he's doing all the circuits. He's doing the talking head stuff. He was talking with Sean Hannity. He's very clearly tried to gin up this California versus Florida battle royale against Ron DeSantis, which, by the way, is a showdown where Gavin Newsom would get his rear end totally kicked. But he's doing everything he can to make it look like he's running for president short of announcing. But, my buddy Ryan Gerdusky, who writes an excellent Substack called the Nationalist Populist Substack, he had, I thought, a pretty sharp piece of analysis earlier this week that kind of talked me off the ledger a little bit. The basic analysis that Ryan put out there was that even if Biden does drop out, the Democratic primary is still going to go on. And, Kamala Harris, as much as you and I and, all of our colleagues in this space, Jesse, think that she is an absolute train wreck, she still is the vice president of the United States. And the polling does show that registered Democrats, if Biden were to drop out, Kamala would be the top choice for a plurality of voters. Gavin Newsom is somewhere around third or fourth in that hypothetical scenario. So, it would be an interesting contest, but I think Kamala would probably be the slight favorite, but Gavin could potentially catch her. Okay, but the system only cares about protecting itself. It cares about power, achieving more of it, and using its power against its enemies. It doesn't have any affection for Joe or Vice President Dome or Gavin Newsom. Why wouldn't they just tell her step aside? And if she says no, then they do what they always do. They pay her off. Okay, don't step aside just out of your goodwill. Have a $10 million a year corporate board job at some solar company or something like that, and then go on about your way. They're not going to risk the presidency on that personality-less hag. Yeah, so look, I mean, to put it bluntly, I mean, Kamala Harris has gotten to where she is through, no shortage of somewhat illicit, unethical, shady conduct. I don't need to elaborate on that, but obviously people can Google Willie Brown, Kamala Harris, and come to their own conclusion. So, she definitely is not immune from that sort of kind of quid pro quo bribery, corruption. But here's the problem, Jesse. The problem is that black voters, who are probably the heart and soul of the Democratic Party's base right now, other than, white PhDs who live in very high income areas on the two coasts, black voters already tell pollsters that they are less excited to vote for Biden this time than they were in 2020. If you recall, it was actually black voters that saved Joe Biden back in 2020. He lost Iowa, and then he came in 5th place in the 2020 Democratic primary in New Hampshire. It was actually in South Carolina, which is home to a large black population in the Democratic primary in particular. It was South Carolina that saved Joe Biden. So, he's very dependent upon black voters, and Kamala Harris, I think, obviously, if the Democrats were to then nuke her, it would kind of be sticking a middle finger into the face of their black voters. And you and I may think that that's totally silly. It's identity politics, it's group politics, it's group grievances, it's intersectionality, it's wokeism, and it is all of that. It is all of that. But the point is, I think for Democrats, that stuff is actually legitimate. So I'm not sure. I mean, they definitely might try. And like I said, Kamala is not immune from that sort of kind of being bought off. But Gavin Newsom, at the end of the day, Jesse, is a white, straight male. And, white, straight men are not necessarily the flavor of the day in Democratic Party circles these days.
Okay, why are black people upset with Joe? All he does is go up and give speeches talking about how much white he sucks. First thing he did when he walked into office was told white people to go back to the back of the line for PPP loans. White farmers, no money for you. All he's done is do handout after handout after handout. Why are they upset?
I mean, I think black voters are probably upset with Biden's performance for the same reason that basically all other Democratic voters are upset with Biden's performance, which is that he sucks and he's a very, very bad president, and that he has epically mishandled America's role on the world stage. The economy is not doing well. Inflation last year reached a 40-year high. I think it reached 9.1% in one CPI index from last July or so. I mean, black voters who, disproportionately speaking, tend to be on the middle or lower end of the income spectrum, obviously not all of them, but disproportionately, they feel the brunt of things like, higher gas prices at the pump, more expensive chicken, eggs, basic produce in the supermarket. So I think that they're probably upset with him for the same reason. I mean, if you are kind of a middle class voter or a lower income voter, how can you look at America's current boondoggle spending in Ukraine, hundreds of billions of dollars, at the expense, seemingly, of trying to rev up the economy at home? How can you look at that and conclude anything other than the fact that this White House is not your friend? So I think it's basically that. At the end of the day, kind of like the sprinkling of breadcrumbs. I mean, Biden's various kind of racial speeches, they only go so far. At the end of the day, people care about the economy. That really kind of is the issue that matters at the end of the day. Jimmy Carville back in the 1990s was right.
For too long, we've been led to believe that communism is a thing of the past. But the truth is, communism is alive. It's here, and it's infiltrating every aspect of American life. Introducing the Anti-Communist Manifesto by Jesse Kelly, the practical guide for patriots ready to defend our nation from its most dangerous enemy. Discover the shocking extent of communist infiltration in our education system, their alliance with American corporations, and the twisted truth behind environmentalism. This eye-opening book exposes the true face of communism and empowers you to fight back. Join the fight for freedom. Pre-order your copy of the Anti-Communist Manifesto today by going to jessekellybook.com.